cut to titles. Yippee Ki Yay! The best poetry action film on stage you'll see today.
Hey, Richard, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Hey Mark, how are you?
I'm thrilled to have you on the podcast, only because I heard of you when I was working on my book about Die Hard, and was writing about you, and then I was like, oh, it'd be so cool if I could get to the UK and see Richard on stage doing this wonderful one-man performance, and lo and behold, you came right into my neck of the woods. I was so thrilled. Um, I want to talk about the origin of Yippee Ki Yay, the stage play. I want because you had mentioned that it had something to do with, I don't know, some global thing that was happening.
Yeah, there was a sort of disease which went round. Um, so it was ever since I started writing poetry, I've
Yeah.
been interested in telling stories which don't seem like they would necessarily be told via poetry,
Yeah.
using poetry to tell exactly those stories. So a good friend of mine, Katie Bonner, and I did a play together called Dirty Great Love Story, and that was
Yes.
a poetry rom-com. And since then, I've been thinking, what else can I
And
do?
that was a
And
stage show, right? That wasn't a radio drama. Is that
yeah,
right?
that's a stage show. I have written for the radio as well. I've written
Okay.
for the BBC over here, but that was a stage show. And then I was thinking, what else could I do? Well, what's the opposite of poetry? An action movie. What's the greatest action movie? Obviously, it's Die Hard. And so for a long time, I thought of the sort of this to me delightful notion of telling Die Hard largely via poetry. And it was one of those ideas that a sort of procrastination project I would think about when I should be doing other things, when deadlines loomed. And then essentially when a pandemic happened, I had a production that was upcoming that wasn't going to happen anymore. And I'd been working on a play that was, I think, would have been a perfectly good play, essentially about sort of grief and loss. And I thought, I don't want to be writing this now. When we get back to theatres after the pandemic, I'm not sure anyone's going to want to watch this play about grief and loss, having just lived through global grief and loss. I think I want to do the idea which is the most sort of enjoyable and comic and warm and human and soaring and silly idea I can think of. I think it's time to write that Die Hard play. And that's what felt like the right time, and I was sort of homeschooling my children, and what could be more escapist and more fun than pretending to be John McClane, and it had sort of two. My ideas often come from things which make me laugh. So one idea which made me laugh was the idea of Die Hard in a poem, and then the other idea that made me laugh is those of you who are listening to this podcast. I'm a skinny, bespectacled British man. I'm sort of very much not the casting of John McClane, and that made me laugh too. The idea of this sort of unlikely physical hero, and so those two things which made me laugh were a good place to start. And then from then on, the job was sort of to both rework and retell the Die Hard story, and also add a sort of a personal story alongside of what it is to be a Die Hard fan, and how love and life change as you go through life from sort of first love to being parents.
Well, I have to say, I mean, absolutely brilliant show, because not only did you pull off telling the whole Die Hard story from every point of view, playing the different characters in such a wonderfully brilliant way, but that personal story really added a beautiful element to the, like, you took an existing fantastic script, you adapted it into poetry with a lot of humor, and a lot like physical humor, and interactions with the audience and stuff like that, which I just thought were absolutely wonderful. And then this completely unexpected subplot of the personal, like, again, the personal story of two nerds who love Die Hard and fall in love with the movie. I just love how you constantly have that backflash. Now you're John McClane in the tower, covered in blood, fake blood, obviously, and then you cut to. I love that. I mean, is so that element must have been important as well, not just telling the Die Hard story, right?
That's right. So when I sort of seriously came to sit down and work out how I was going to do this idea, very early on I felt, well, I don't want to solely retell Die Hard. There are a lot of shows which parody movies, and they are essentially having laughs with the source material. Some of them tell the whole story of the source material, many of them don't. And that's great. And I've watched some of those and really enjoyed them. But I wanted to do two things. I wanted to both tell all of Die Hard, and I wanted to also tell a personal story alongside that. So I wasn't solely telling Die Hard, but actually, you know, if any of your listeners ever watch the show, the telling of Die Hard has meaning beyond the telling of Die Hard. It has meaning in the personal story. And the personal story, it echoes the position of John and Holly in the movie. So in the movie, John and Holly are, I'm sure all of your listeners will know this, particularly listening to this episode, but John and Holly are estranged. They haven't seen each other for almost 6 months. He goes to try to reconcile with her on Christmas Eve. Like many couples at Christmas, they argue. Unlike many couples at Christmas, they're unable to reconcile due to terrorist action. And I think that's sort of, for me, one of the reasons Die Hard has lasted and is as beloved now as it was when it was released is that it has real truth to it. You know, that we all love our families. We all love seeing them at Christmas time, but also our families can be a lot. It can be stressful. And I think there's real truth to the John and Holly's relationship in Die Hard. And I wanted to write a personal story of what it is to be a fan of a movie, what it is to love a piece of art, and how you love a piece of art. You know, if you hear a song playing in your junior high school prom and that's your first kiss, then that song hits you so strongly. And then when you hear it again in your 20s, it hits you with not only what you felt the first time, but how you've changed when you hear it in your 20s. And if you hear it again in your 30s or your 40s, art impacts us differently as we go through life. And I wanted to talk about that because Die Hard had impacted me so much when I saw it on a VHS when I was a child, that I was now sitting here rewriting it in poetry, and I wanted to talk about what it is to be a fan of Die Hard as well as to retell Die Hard. And so the show tells two stories. It tells the story of Die Hard, which takes place over one night, and it tells the story of being a fan of Die Hard, which takes place over a lifetime. And to me, once I'd worked out structurally how to do that, I was a bit nervous as to whether it would be overly complicated, but it turns out I was underestimating audiences, and it's perfectly easy to understand. And I think it is what makes the show what it is, really. So I'm really glad you responded to it.
Well, it's in the way that I watch Die Hard at least once a year, and have since the early '80s when it first came out. This is the kind of stage show I would want to go to again. Also because you did have some dynamic interactions with the audience. It wasn't a huge part of the show, but there were the layered bits. I mean, you're in Canada. There's a mention of Trudeau. There's a mention of some Canadian culture and locales and stuff like that, which obviously you didn't do when you were performing. So let's talk about the stage show. You first performed in London or in the UK?
Yeah, so start off in the UK. So the first time I actually performed at all was my director, Hal Chambers. When I was trying to get him on board at the beginning of the rehearsal process, he was assistant director on an Royal Shakespeare Company production at a Barbican Theatre in London, and Hal wanted to hear the script, and I went to meet him in the bar of the Barbican Theatre in London, and Hal made me read him the whole script in the bar of the Barbican, and I at that point I really wanted him to do it, but it was in a bar and people walking past, and I thought I've actually got to do my best performance here to convince him to do the show, and so the first time I did it was sort of just like a madman, sort of spewing this poetry in the bar with people walking past going, what terrorists? What are you talking about? Who's Carl? Who's Gruber? You know, well, I guess it was Christmas, so maybe it had worked out who it was, but Christmas time. But it was the first time I did it, and the first time we did it in a sort of proper public performance was at a theatre called the Omnibus in London in March of 2022. Then we sort of did some more previews. James Seabright came on to produce it, and it actually produced. The premiere was at the Edinburgh Fringe in 2022, summer 2022. And since then, we've been touring around the UK. James decided to try the US, and so we toured the US in Christmas 2023. And then we've been to Australia, to Adelaide Fringe, touring around the UK more, and then back to the US and Canada in 2024 to 2020, to this year, to 2025. And yeah, I've never been to Canada before, so overjoyed to be in Toronto. People have told me perhaps I've chosen one of the colder parts of the year.
Yeah, it was one of the worst times of the year to come to Canada. I mean, it was so funny. I saw, I was like, oh my God, he's coming to Canada. I was like, I gotta take my son. This has been a thing we've done our entire lives together. Well, I mean, once he got to a certain age, 8, he was okay for him to watch the violence or whatever. But
I think it's a 6+, isn't it? I think
yeah,
that's what.
yeah, it definitely is. No, Star
Yeah.
Wars was 6. I remember that. But no, I just thought it was so amazing, and it didn't matter because we saw it in. I think we saw your last show in Toronto
Yeah.
because with his work schedule and my travel and stuff like that, that was the that was the one we could make it to. Um, okay, so let's. The tour was amazing. This is the kind of show I want to see again, but I also want to bring new people to see because you know when you show your favorite movie to someone, you want to watch their reaction and see, okay, what are they gonna? So anyway, so but I want to get into some of the other stuff that you've done by combining poetry with sitcom and poetry. You talked about what was it, Dirty Great Love Story, and that
Yes.
was a stage show, or was that
Yeah,
a
that was a TV show. Yeah, so I met Katie at a poetry night, and she won a slam, and I thought she was fantastic. And we took the train home together because we both lived in Tooting in South London, and we got talking, and I discovered that she was an actor and she was a playwright, and I was a playwright, and we started talking about the idea of maybe it would be interesting to try and write a poem together, two of you, like a two-hander poem. And I had at that stage not seen anyone do a poem like that. And so we thought, well, just very quickly came up with a story of what if we both meet. She's on a, what I think, do you talk about bachelor and bachelorette parties in Canada? In the UK, you call it stag and hen.
Yeah,
But
very similar. Well, we're Canadian, so we speak American and proper English.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, a bachelorette slash stag and hen nights, and these two people have a kind of a staggering drunken night, and then fall into bed together and wake up the next morning and have to decide what to do. And we thought this would be a fun thing to tell, and we could get her point of view and my point of view, and when we were talking to each other, you would hear them do dialogue, and when they spoke to the audience, they would speak in poetry and speak their inner thoughts. And so it's that wonderful comedy of, you think the person thinks something, but in fact they think something completely different. And we wrote that together. It was about 12, 15 minutes, I think, initially. And we did it at a poetry night Katie ran in a pub in South London in Balham. And people, from the first time we did it, people really liked it. And this piece got booked. We called it a duet at that point.
Sure.
And it was a really fun thing to do and quite a popular piece. And obviously, you're talking about poetry. It's a very small world. There's not many people do it or go to it. But the people who do go there are sort of the most lovable weirdos in the world. And it was, people liked it, and then the following summer I was up at the Edinburgh Fringe doing a show called Skittles, which was sort of essentially a one-person storytelling show. Yeah, it's about love and candy, which is more reliable. And I was doing, and it was sort of getting quite well received and well reviewed, and I was saying to Katie, look, I think we should do the duet up here. I think we should do it at the Edinburgh Fringe. And we wrote it and we expanded it out from sort of 10, 15 minutes to, I think it was like 70 minutes in Edinburgh. Wow. And we had sort of in the original version, they'd woken up the next morning, decided to not go on with their stag and hen days, but spend a day with each other. So it was like a happy ending. Yeah. And in the longer version, they did not do that. They went through many stages of their lives and eventually got together at the end. And it was a hit show at the Fringe. It was a hit show. It won an award called a Fringe First for new writing up there. And it played London, it played New York, it played London with other actors. It sort of had a really good life. And that was the show which allowed me to move from being a sort of an obsessed hobbyist writer to getting income from writing, got an agent, got an American agent, and kind of that opened a door for me for many other things which have happened since.
That was the first one then. That was the first show that you had done before. So you had done Skittles though, right?
I did a show called Skittles in 2011, okay. and then Dirty Great Love Story was 2012, and just a number of people opened a number of doors, and a writer called Chris Neal introduced me to his US agent, and then I had an agent in LA, and all of these different things happened as a result of that show, and just sort of two people in a small room in Edinburgh making jokes and telling rhymes, and it was a wonderful, wonderful break. Yeah, I'd sort of, throughout my 20s, I was attempting to be a playwright. I was writing these plays, and certainly in the UK, there was a lot of kind of writer development, or there was in those days, where you could get a workshop here or a rehearsed reading there, and I was having a lot of that sort of encouragement, but without ever being close to an income, a livable income.
Right.
And so it was all that time I was working as a video editor to support my writing. And it was when I started combining poetry with my plays and performing as a poet, the most uncommercial possible thing you can do. Like, you take playwriting, not the most profitable medium anyway, and you add that sort of the box office catnip of poetry. but for me, it worked. I followed my strange star. And as soon as I started doing poetry, I started winning slams. I started getting booked to do gigs, and I think a plant grows towards the sunlight.
Wow.
That's what I did.
What was it? I guess it sounds like it was poetry first and then playwriting, and then you merged them, or was like what came first, the play or the poem?
Um, uh, so I would, in terms of trying to be a writer, it was playwriting first. Sort of that's what I did
Okay.
at university. That's what I did in my 20s. I'd always written poems for sort of like very bad birthday card poems, which would be sort of happy birthday, Mark. My lighting is quite dark. It would be that level of kind of
Yeah,
just
yeah.
kind of stuff. But then the first proper play I wrote was in rhyming couplets at university. Do you have pantomimes in Canada? You probably don't have pantomimes. You do, yeah. Okay, great. So in the UK, pantomimes are often, they have a lot of rhyme in some of them, and so I wrote a Cinderella and a Beanstalk. It was a mashup ahead of its time of Cinderella and Jack and a Beanstalk, and that was in rhyming couplets. And I remember having a feeling that I really enjoyed writing that way, and you get laughs from good rhymes and you get laughs from bad rhymes as well, which is really helpful. So if you have a character say, isn't this a silly caper? Look at this photosynthesizing skyscraper. You will get a laugh for the forced nature of your rhyme. And if a rhyme is elegant and it hits particularly if you can hit your punchline on the second rhyme of a couplet, that's incredibly helpful. It deepens the laughter, I think, because there's an extra punch to it. But then I stopped writing poetry in my plays. No one told me to. I just decided to try to be Timberlake Wertenbaker or Arthur Miller or August Wilson or any of these other fantastic writers, but they already exist, those writers. They are really good at being themselves. There's no need for me to try and be them. And it took me essentially 10 years of my life and a bit of heartbreak to start writing poetry. And then that was what really unlocked it for me.
Wow. See, when I think coming from the book world, the writer book world, when I think of poetry, yes, the most enjoyable poetry has been when I've gone to hear it live rather than reading it on a page. But I always think about, okay, and I just, a couple months ago I had a poet that I know, a horror writer who just released a book of poetry, and we chatted about that. Have you actually published any poetry books or any play slash poetry books, or is it all live performance?
So I've not poetry per se, but I might have some of them. So two of my plays have been published. Dead Great Love Story was published,
Okay.
and also I don't know if I've got Wingman here. There's another one of mine. So Wingman and Skittles are published as well. So this is
Oh, okay.
that's Dead Great Love Story. That's online. I don't know if the sort of physical copy is available. It's published by Methuen and Bloomsbury, and Wingman and Skittles is also they're all available as electronic publishing, if not in physical copies.
So that means if somebody here in
Context.
Canada wanted to license to do that dirty great love story here in Canada,
Yeah, they can do it. It gets licensed for amateur production every now and then, and which is
yeah.
lovely to know it's got life beyond us.
Yeah, I've had that happen once. A play that I've written was performed. It wasn't licensed because I don't have an agent or anything. It was just performed by a local high school, and
Oh,
it was just so cool to see somebody else direct my play.
yes.
That's got to be have you ever had a chance to see somebody else put on one of the things that you've written?
So yeah, this is for the off West End run of Dead Great Love Story. The original one had Katie and I on the cover. Had this on the cover.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Yeah.
so this was Felix Scott and Aisha Antoine played the parts in this, and they were great. It was very interesting to watch other people play it. Felix is a lot better looking than me, so the kind of the nerdy, bespectacled lead character suddenly got a bit of a glow up, which was nice for Richard in the play. But yeah, and I've written, for example, we're working on a musical adaptation of a movie which I cannot sing. No one needs to hear me sing. So I've seen actors play lines I've written in other forms as well.
Oh man. Okay, so I want to go back to some of the logistics of we'll start with Die Hard, Yippee Ki Yay, the
Yeah.
stage play. So I know when I was writing the book, I had to license images for use, like movie poster and stuff like that. How does that work in terms of you needing any permissions from Disney now?
Yeah.
Because they told me go away, little boy, when I tried to get license for the cover. I could license
Okay.
the interior of
Yeah.
the book, but not the cover, so I had to have an artist sketch the bloody shirt.
Okay.
And so yeah, they kind of said, "Go away, little boy. You probably can't afford to talk to us or whatever."
Right, okay. So this is really James Seabright, our producer, is the person you should really be asking this question
Oh,
of.
okay.
As I understand it, it's to do with parody, and
Ah, of course.
I wrote this play not knowing if it was stageable because obviously it's borrowing from Die Hard,
Yeah.
and I wrote it just because I wanted to write it and I thought it'd be a good escape during lockdown, and then a friend of mine, John Britton, said I'll talk to James. James does a show. He then did a show. He still does it called Potted Potter, which is
Oh,
all about
yes.
books and
Yes,
seven.
that's him. Okay. Oh, wow.
And so he has kind of previous with this sort of IP adjacent production, and
And escaping Rowling's lawyers is even scarier than Disney's lawyers sometimes.
maybe I don't know, but he said to be a parody, your show needs to have changed the form of the original
Okay.
and comment on the original, and mine definitely did that. It's got one actor. It's largely in poetry, and you've seen the show, like particularly towards the end, I comment quite a lot on the original, and and do various things to it towards the end, and so I had sort of unwittingly done everything you needed to do to be a parody without knowing what a parody was. So that was just a great stroke of luck for me, I think. It can be staged. It had this sort of life. But yeah, that's how. And so there isn't any actual imagery from the movie in the stage show. Partly because what we're doing is retelling it, but also probably for that reason too, although we wouldn't have wanted to put it in there anyway, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, I was just curious about that because that can sometimes be a loophole. So I want to talk about, so this was a personal project. This was something you were working on, and then you got a director.
Yeah.
How did that work? Because you're the source. You created all this, and somebody else telling you. I mean, how does that work? Because you have to kind of let go of some of that.
Yeah, so absolutely, and I wanted to. So one of the reasons, one of the differences between this and my previous shows is, well, one difference is it's retelling a movie. The other difference is it's much more physical than stuff I've done before, which has been staged and sometimes has had not just me in it, but this has got a fantastic movement director, an associate director in Emma Webb. It's got puppetry, it's got stage fighting, it's got kind of massive great, it's got the set is the lights, are great, and it's got a sort of what to me is a delightful idea, wasn't my idea, of having sort of finger guns and great big Hollywood sound effects when those guns fire. So which makes, I think, it makes the audience complicit in the silliness and the theatricality of it, because we're not trying to show things in a kind of very realistic way. We're
Yes.
doing it kind of, it's quite playful. It's quite like children playing, right? And so I knew I needed collaborators to bring this to life because I'd sort of written more than I knew how to stage. And
Yeah.
Hal Chambers, the director, was sort of instrumental in this. He brought on a sound designer. We're working with my friend Emma Webb, who's the movement director, and I knew I couldn't do this on my own, so I wanted that collaboration. I'd written this great big thing because I wrote it not really intending for it to be on. I mean, as I wrote it, I thought this is quite good. I hope this can be on a stage, but initially it was just for the fun of writing it, and so I wasn't really concerned with stageability. John has a fight now with Tony, who's Big Carl's brother. Well, I'm just going to write this fight, and then later on work out how to do it, And so I needed those collaborators, and they were essential to the show. It would be just vastly worse, and I think you wouldn't have got to see it if they hadn't been working on the show.
Yeah. And I just think so. Here in Canada, there was a TV show. This was actually the person who inspired Mr. Rogers in the U.S. was
Okay.
Mr. Dress Up, and he had what's called a tickle trunk. So Canadians talk about it's just where you have your little costumes and you pull thing. He always
Okay.
pulled something
Yeah.
out, and he would always. And you had a tickle trunk, a
Yes.
couple sort of tickle trunks that you're constantly pulling things out of. And every single time you went, I mean, there's certain running jokes with the hair. There's certain running jokes with the waterfall,
Yeah.
but then you're constantly getting the tickle trunk where you've got like little miniatures and you've got the bear, obviously, a big part of it.
Mhm.
That was that part of the script, or was that something that was worked in later as it was being developed for that? Okay, now we're doing the one man show.
So most of it was originally in the script, but then how it happened changed.
Oh,
So,
right.
for example, in the movie, John gets dirtier and dirtier. That he goes from his sort of coat to his shirt to his vest to barefoot to gradually that vest gets dirtier and sometimes less dirtier and then more dirty as the script goes on. So I knew I wanted to do that, but originally I had a white vest on top of like a grey vest on top of a black vest, and I took the vest off.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and then I think it was Hal said, "Let's just make it dirty." So there's a point in the middle of the show where I cover myself in stage blood, and there's another stage where I cover myself in what is actually cocoa powder, when he blows the elevator shaft. So it was things like that where we know we want John to get dirty like he is in the film. How do we execute that in a way that's kind of fun and also like quick to do, because you don't want to stop the action for too long to have these things happen.
Yeah.
So most of it is inspired by the movie and some things from the script. So the bear fight, I have a fight with a teddy bear at the beginning of the show. That was in the script. Hal was initially a bit unsure about that, but then he got into the idea very quickly, and he'd worked a lot with puppetry in his past career, so that's why it's sort of he taught me a lot of puppetry, and then Emma did help with him, did the movement side of things, and so it's a collaboration between us and the sound designer, and then the LX as well. So
Wow.
most of it's mutual.
Well, I have to say, anyone listening, if you get a chance, this is playing anywhere near you. It's worth a several-hour drive to get there and to check it out. And I'm curious, of course, if I ever get a chance to see any of your other performances. But you also did. So we talked a little bit. You mentioned Wingman, the father-son show. So that's also a stage show, or was that a radio?
Yeah, that's also a stage show. So that's a two-hander with me and my friend Jerome Wright played my dad in that, and that was when I wrote that when I was I was just about to be a father for the first time, and I was reflecting a lot on what it is to be a son and to be a father as well, and so it's a two-hander between a son and his dad. It's essentially sort of if you can imagine a romantic comedy, but between father and son. So not romantic love, but family love, in that they really rub each other the wrong way. The dad's been out of the son's life for a long time when the mum dies, and that sort of forces them back into each other's orbit just at a time when the son is becoming a father. So it's comic, it's raw, it's one of my favorite things I've written, and that was that's a show which it played the Edinburgh Festival. It played in London. It got option for UK TV. It got option for US TV. It has yet to be on TV.
That happens with options. Yeah.
It does happen. Yeah. And funny enough, one of the things which is sort of so nice about Yippee Ki Yay is I write, perhaps like you, I don't know, but I write so many things which don't actually get to see a reader or a viewer or an audience member, so many things which end up as kind of an elaborate PDF on my hard drive.
Yeah.
That writing something like Yippee, which I think it's now in its fourth year of being performed, that's sort of, to have that ongoing connection from a piece is fantastic. And also for me as a writer, to have that income from one piece, it took, I'm still getting income from it 4 years later. That's hugely helpful, and sort of not what I've experienced before in the theatre.
Oh man, that is amazing that it's a show that can continue, like Cats.
Yes. Yeah. One of the nicest moments from Yippee Ki Yay is Stephen E. D'Souza, who is one of the co-writers of Die Hard and Die Hard 2.
Yeah.
He came to see the show in London.
Oh
So
my God, that must have been so. Did you get a chance to meet him?
I did, yes. I was really nervous because, I think you've seen the show. I think it's clearly the creation of someone who's a colossal fan of Die Hard.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
also,
yeah, for sure.
we have fun with Die Hard. We change the ending. We criticize certain bits in a loving way. And so I was quite nervous as to what he would think. And he came as there's a festival called the London Action Festival, and they were having him over because I think he was talking about a screening of maybe it was Commando or some of his other movies. I think he was doing Q&As for and this kind of thing. And they thought they'd seen my show at Wilton's Music Hall, and they thought it'd be fun to have this with Stephen watching it. And so we did it in the Royal Albert Hall, believe it or not, in a small room at the top of, but at the Royal Albert Hall. And Stephen came along, and it was quite a strange show because when it began, the audience were quite quiet. And I realized that everybody there were basically massive Die Hard nerds like me. And they knew Stephen was there, and they were there sort of to see the show, but I think really to see Stephen and see what Stephen thought of the show. And so I think everyone was sort of slightly, what does Stephen think of the show? Watching the thing. And then luckily he started laughing. He was clearly enjoying it. And I think that freed up the rest of the room to enjoy it as well. And that was a really nice show. And then, we did a Q&A afterwards, and he was incredibly gracious and kind about it. We got to have dinner, and, we sort of email sometimes, and he's given us like a PR quote for the show. And he's an absolute gent. He's a lovely man. And, it's really sort of beyond my wildest dreams that I've got to meet writers of this work, which meant so much to me and means so much to me. I feel incredibly lucky.
Oh, that is amazing. Because I mean, Stephen took an existing script, which was based on a pretty good book. The script was way better than the book. And then Stephen, I mean, he added that love story element to it, which is so you've done the same work to his script that he did to the original, right? Yeah. When you think about it, right? He added this whole beautiful element that makes it such a classic. And that's what I think makes your show such a classic, is you took, and obviously you parody it because you love it so much. Yeah. And so the laughs are, that is funny. Ha ha ha. Oh my, I never thought of it that way, but I still love it.
Yes. Yeah. So. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and also, I watch it. I'm still watching it at Christmas. On our last tour, Benji's the technical stage manager who does all the lights and sounds on the day. Okay. We went to see it with me still in my vest from the show, the blood stains. We went to see it play in Denver. Yeah, so we're all fans of it. Definitely.
Well, the one thing I regret is not wearing the sweater I had made for a photo shoot, because I did a bunch of photo shoots for my author photo, and one of them is me with a Christmas hat with a sweater that says "Ho ho ho! Now I have a machine gun." It's like, why didn't I wear that to the show? What was I thinking? So my apologies for that.
That's all right. I've loved it if you had done. I think we get a lot of Nakatomi 1988 Christmas party shirts. We get a few of those ones. I think it was in Indianapolis. It might have been Milwaukee. Someone turned up in full Dead Tony. So he had that jumper, he had that sweatshirt, he had the grey sweatpants and the hat. Yeah. And the sign, and took a photo. So that was a nice touch. But yeah, we had quite a few people in vests as well, in A shirts as well on this last tour, which was really nice.
Yeah, so. I was so pleased to see other people in the audience that were sort of dressed themed appropriately. It was like, yes, I'm not alone. There are so many other people who love this. Can I ask a huge favor? Could I love your American accent when you do John? Is there a line you could just quickly?
Sure. Yeah. Let's go. Hello, I'm John McClane. I hate flying, but I'm on a plane.
And that's a perfect example, a wonderful teaser for the incredible power of poetry, parody, and obviously your passion for this. So you said you're working on a musical, or sorry, a parody of a musical. That's
it's not a parody. It's a musical adaptation of a movie called Son of Rambo, which is a British movie from, I think, the early noughties, maybe, I think, and it was Will Poulter's first film. It's a beautiful movie about a sort of coming of age story of kind of an Artful Dodger character and an Oliver character. The Oliver character is he's a member of a religious group called the Plymouth Brethren, who I think they do have in the US and Australia and around the world. And essentially he's grown up not being allowed to read books, listen to music, or watch TV or films. And then the Artful Dodger character, kind of naughty character played by Will Poulter, shows him his first movie, and it is Rambo: First Blood, right? So it's got a quintessential action movie, and so that blows his mind, and they start making a film together, and it's a brilliant story about sort of the power of art, friendship, coming of age, leaving of religious belief, and how that frees you up, and what kids used to get up to in the 80s before they had to be safe the whole time. So it's, you know, so it's a lovely book and gives you lots of different. I'm writing a book and co-writing the lyrics with Miranda Cooper, and who's a just amazing composer, and it's a lovely story to adapt because it exists on all of these different levels, and I think that's really helpful when you're writing a musical. And yeah, I think writing a song, sitting there and Miranda and I kind of working on lyrics, and then she starts singing and a song is created before you. It's just sort of the most incredible magical alchemy you can imagine. It's huge fun.
Awesome. Well, that's something for people to look forward to when that is coming out, relatively like sometime in 2025, I imagine.
I don't know. Probably no. It won't be 2025. I hope it happens at some point in the future. Sort of the pandemic sort of kicked in the gut a little bit, but I hope it comes back to life at some point.
Awesome. Okay, and where can people find out more about you online?
So my website is richmarsh.com. I'm on. Do you want my Insta and Twitter and that kind of thing, or should I give it to you so you can link it in the show?
I'll put your URL, and then I'll also add your Instagram, Twitter, and links to all the stuff that I find off your website there. I'll add that to the show notes.
Yeah. So yeah, my website's richmarsh.com, and then for more about Yippee Ki Yay, it's ykYlive.com.
Yeah, and sorry, you do the same handle, right? It's and it's got the spectacle thing in it, right? You're at.
Oh yeah, so it's at Specky with the good hair. So
the good hair, yes. Yeah. I'm so jealous. Awesome, Richard. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thanks for talking. I've really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you very much indeed.